I was once asked in a job interview what I hate most about my job. And one of the things I hate most about it, I would say, is that there is this weird, nerdy, implicit knowledge sometimes that you encounter. So I was trying to do multiplayer, or I'm working on the multiplayer right now. So I need to use WebSockets. And initially, because of my new job, they use Elixir. And Elixir is even known to be really good at real-time data stuff and being really fast and all that and scalable. So I wanted to have Elixir in the backend to serve me WebSockets or sockets or whatever. I don't really care about the exact naming. I'm aware of some differences there. So WebSockets is like the technology, but then people do like call it channels or socket or whatever to build on top of that. Anyways, I wanted to have Elixir in the back serving me agnostically, or at least serving me to my nextjs frontend application. And then, yeah, I wanted on the React frontend application, I wanted to communicate obviously to this Elixir backend, and I couldn't get it working. It was so absurd. I tried to get it working and it just didn't work, and I thought it was Elixir's fault because I don't know, like I haven't worked with it at all. But turns out it was multiple other things. So I searched what are the best front-end client libraries for WebSockets, and the biggest one is Socket.io. So I looked into the Socket.io documentation for this, found the Socket.io client, and I used that, and I fired request off to my Phoenix backend. The URL of the Socket.io had my URL / socket.io in it, and I couldn't remove this from the URL, and I couldn't find anything on the internet how to fix this. They just said there was a lot of like really basic tutorials on how to specify the URL, but nothing about this URL thingy, and that was so frustrating. So after like giving up on this, and yeah, so I lost a day on this, and then I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna build this with Node.js because everybody's building this with Node.js, and I wanted to get it working before I get it working with Elixir because nothing is working. And so I built it with Node.js, and I think it still wasn't really working. So no, I used a example project. So I just pulled an example repository, and there it was more or less working. There were some reserved words that were being used, which I don't know, it was like really odd. So finally I get it working, and then I kind of find out that for Socket.io, the reason it didn't work is you need both the client and the backend. You need to be both in Socket.io because it's more or less its own protocol or whatever, like they have their own way of talking to each other. And so it's not gonna really understand other stuff. And because I think I tried to use on the front end, I tried to use WebSockets and eventually, because I grew too frustrated with this URL problem, and it could communicate to the Socket.io, but it couldn't really send. I think it just could send stuff or just receive stuff or something like it. Or it could log in, but it couldn't send any messages. Like the on connect would work, but then sending any events or emitting any events or listening to any events, it would just not work. So that was really frustrating. So finally, I found out it's because Socket.io depends on, like they both depend on each other. The Socket frontend and the backend, Socket.io, they both need to be Socket.io, which I think is, I mean, why don't you tell me this, like why is this not more prevalent? And like with other things like REST APIs and so on, you don't have this odd thing. They just expect me to know this. It's so, yeah, Jesus Christ, it's really frustrating. I lost like a day or two on this. And it's not super obvious. I don't know, like I scan documentation, I don't like read it line by line, but I think that's also good and energy saving. Maybe not, maybe I just lost 2 days because of this, but you get my point, hopefully. So the next thing I then try is I try to understand why. So I try to understand why WebSockets, not the Socket.io, but the WebSocket thingy is not working, because that was also not working with the Phoenix thing. So then I research in this, and I find a bunch of useless stuff, of course, but then I find the one thread on like the Phoenix forum, or yeah, Phoenix forums, where somebody has the same idea like me. They want an agnostic Phoenix WebSocket backend. And it turns out that for the like proper Phoenix implementation with channels, you need a Phoenix front-end client that will consume the information. So it's not agnostic, and you can just consume it from anything. You could like reverse engineer, but yeah, there is like you can still use Phoenix, but then you have to build your own sort of WebSocket client or whatever. Like they have the underlying technology apparently available, but it's just too much of a hassle. And yes, I couldn't really, that was really frustrating. And it took me a while to find this out. And yeah, eventually so I basically abandoned Phoenix for this idea, which is ironic because it's supposed to be really good for this purpose. So I settled on Node.js because the server is also not that complicated yet. I settled on that. So I tried to really get the work starting, and I transferred this example project to my regular project. So I still had the server on because the server was fine, but then I copied all the code just to get the hello world working to my proper application. It didn't work again. Then I tried to find out why it's not working and spent like hours on this, right? Spent another day on this, and why it didn't work? So I found this randomly on Stack Overflow. The reason is that it was just some offhand comment on Stack Overflow. Both versions from the client and the server, they need to be on the same version, which, oh, Jesus Christ, I mean, yeah, maybe, but then really, like, it just completely doesn't work. So yeah, I put them both on the same version, and I ran into some other minor problems that I fixed. And then finally, I got it working. So then I built a really simple prototype where so it was working, I could finally start working on it, and that's what I did. I got it to the point where there was like 2 people in the same screen, and then if you respond to something, depending on who responded with it, there's like 2 scores, and then the correct score increases. And that was pretty cool. It was pretty wonky, and there's so it's like a bunch of work to actually fix this. And I've been a bit of a slump, so I've been drinking too much coffee, and then I stopped drinking coffee, and now I can't work anymore. But yeah, I've been there's like some more difficult problem that I have to tackle, because basically I have to synchronize the game state with the game. So right now it's working, the normal game, but when I had multiplayer, if there's a response, it needs to send to the player that didn't respond that he basically respond, like he didn't respond, but he needs to have the same reaction. His screen needs to stop, and then there needs to be the correct and the wrong word, and then after some time needs to move on to the next word for both players too, and the words need to be synchronized. So I need to have logic for sending words to the server that sends in those words to both players, and then either the game ends after maybe 10 words, I think that's what I'm going to do, or 15 words, that's what I'm going to do first, or it's going to resend them, but I think it's better to just do it like for some number of words. And yeah, like all of these small minor details have to really flawlessly work. They have to be rooms, I think. So I think I should do this with rooms, not sure. And there needs to be proper logic with entering games, leaving games, entering a name, all this stuff. And yeah, so there's basically getting the initial prototype working. That was a breeze, but I mean, it wasn't. The setup was a nightmare. The actual implementation of a prototype was a breeze, but then actually getting it properly to work and be nice, that is going to be a lot of work, I think. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now. I think the leaderboard, if I get to that, it should be much easier. Yeah, let's see. So I hope you found this interesting. Have a nice day. Bye.